In this video, we're going to be covering the differences between bar exam essay answers and law school exam essay answers. The reason this is so important and the reason why we want to take a second to discuss these differences is because everyone has heard of a law student that did excellent in law school, maybe even graduated at the top of their class, maybe they even landed that one-of-a-kind position. And then they went on to fail the bar exam. I know oftentimes students come to us and they tell us they've heard those types of stories and it makes them nervous while they're preparing for the bar. But the reason these types of stories exist is because those types of students who excelled in law school and then failed the bar exam, more likely than not, approached the bar exam and their essay responses in the exact same way they approached their law school essay exam responses. And unfortunately, they're not the same thing. While of course you have to know the law to do well and to pass the bar exam, you also have to know how to take this test. And that's why if you're listening to this video, you're in the right place. So let's talk about how our bar exam essay answers are different than those law school exam essay answers. So first things first, there are less issues to analyze in bar exam essay answers. Oftentimes for law school exams, they were long. You might have had 3 or 4 hours to answer a question or maybe 2. So there were many things you had to discuss. Oftentimes, they were issue spotting exams, so you had to hunt down all of those issues you were supposed to address. And oftentimes, there was a sub-issue associated with an issue, and sometimes even a sub-issue your professor expected you to address. However, for bar exam purposes, this is not the case. Usually, you're addressing 3 to 4 issues at most. So again, and usually you're not even hunting down those issues. The next big difference is these issues tend to be much more clear on the bar exam. As I previously mentioned, for your law school essays, you usually had to issue spot or hunt down all those issues and sub-issues and sometimes even those sub-issues that you were supposed to be addressing. But for bar exam essay purposes, usually there is very pointed questions that the examiners are seeking you to discuss. Usually they simply come out and ask you to analyze something. So there's oftentimes very little issue spotting that goes into answering a bar exam essay question. So that is another huge difference between a law school exam and a bar exam question. The third major difference is for most bar exam essay answers, you do not have to argue both sides. In fact, most bar exam questions are simply asking you to address the issue, articulate the rule, analyze it, and then reach a conclusion. Whereas back in law school, if you performed well, you were likely in the habit of addressing an issue, providing a rule, and then analyzing the arguments on both sides of that issue, and then analyzing to possible conclusions or a conclusion if one even existed. Here for bar purposes, that is not the expectation. Sometimes they do expect you or they will ask you to argue both sides of an issue, but that is truly the exception to the rule. The general expectation on a bar exam essay is you give the rule, you analyze it, and then you reach a conclusion. Now, the only thing to keep in mind that I have not yet mentioned is that for purposes of the MEE, sometimes the examiners want you to outline the different approaches that may be applicable to a legal issue. So to give you a quick example of this, let's say you're faced with a mortgage issue on an essay question, but let's say your fact pattern doesn't tell you about what type of jurisdiction you're in. Maybe it's not clear whether you're in a lien theory or a title theory state. In this instance, the examiners are expecting you to articulate the different approaches, to analyze those facts under those different approaches, and to reach a conclusion under each approach. Now, if the examiners tell you what type of jurisdiction you're in, maybe that fact pattern tells you you're in a lien theory state, well then just apply that rule of law, analyze it to a conclusion. So again, to recap this major difference, you are usually not arguing both sides of any given issue on the bar exam, where that was the norm back in law school. The next major difference is all about the conclusion. Conclusions matter on bar exam essay answers. We know that in law school, oftentimes professors gave very little points to a conclusion. Some professors gave no points at all, and sometimes there really wasn't even a conclusion. So that is how the bar exam differs greatly. Usually there is a conclusion or a single best answer in response to the questions presented on the bar exam. These examiners are expecting you to be able to reason to a conclusion, and the correct conclusion at that. In the past, we've seen examinees who have been unsuccessful answer bar exam questions like a law school exam and not reach a conclusion. And they failed the bar exam because each essay question in and question out, they just simply failed to reach conclusions to the questions posed. And to me, that was very clear to the examiners that this examinee had never practiced bar essays. So you want to make sure that you shift gears while practicing bar essays, and you make sure you get in the habit of reaching a conclusion and try your hardest to reach the correct or better overall conclusion to any given issue. And finally, the last major difference between law school essay answers and bar exam essay responses is that your bar exam essay answers tend to be much shorter than any law school essay response would be. And this usually just simply goes to the fact that there's less time on the bar. Like I mentioned previously, it's traditional for most law school exams to be a few hours long, and sometimes there was only one fact pattern or maybe two that you were supposed to tackle. For bar purposes, you're only going to have 30 minutes to answer each question, and the examiners know that. That's why you usually only have 3 to 4 questions max to address. They understand you're working under timed constraints, and the question is written and tailored accordingly. So hopefully now you have a better idea of those differences between bar exam essay answers and law school exam answers, and you can adjust accordingly as you prepare for the bar exam.